You are listening to Quality Time, a podcast designed to support Nebraskan providers through their journey with Step Up to Quality. I am your host, Colleen Schmidt. Get ready to listen as we prepare to elevate each other as we step up to quality. Welcome back, listeners. We are so happy that you're here. Welcome back to season 2. Happy back to school season for those of you who are working in a classroom setting that follows that summer schedule. We are all of a sudden transitioning back to school. I feel like summer just began. It went really quick. It's been a whirlwind, but we are ready to get back into the routine. For our very first podcast of season 2, we are discussing transitioning preschoolers to kindergarten. And when I say preschoolers, I mean children ages 4 and 5 here in Nebraska that are ready to move on to that next step in their journey with education. And it is a big one. Going to kindergarten is our topic today, and how as providers we can support our families in preparing for that big transition. So today we have a panel session for our first episode, and we have Carol Burke and Emily Dapperco both with us from Nebraska Department of Ed. I'm going to stop talking so you two can introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your experience or your journey, and tell us the lens you're going to use when you're looking through thinking of transitioning to kindergarten. So Carol, I'll have you start. Tell us a little bit about what you do now and what you used to do that makes you relevant for our panel.
Okay, thanks, Colleen. I'm Carol Burke, and I'm an early childhood education specialist at the Nebraska Department of Education. Prior to that, I was an early childhood teacher. I taught in a preschool room, an inclusive preschool room, Head Start, 3 to 5-year-olds. And I also currently adjunct at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and I teach a class called Play as a Learning Medium. Mm-hmm. So my lens is going to be from my early childhood education experience, but also from that advocacy of including play in learning and play in schools.
I love that. Carol, remind me as we're getting going with this, I want to talk a little bit about play and play's role in preparing and transition.
Sure.
Because I think there's lots of different camps that you can belong to with play, and we can even get into the continuum a little bit and talk maybe about guided play and what that looks like and how that. Okay, cool. So that's very exciting. We're so happy you're here. And Emily, can you share a little bit about what you do now and what you used to do?
Yes, of course. I right now work with the Department of Ed as an early childhood education specialist, also with Carol. Prior to that, I operated an in-home daycare out of my home, and I was licensed as an in-home daycare, but operated as a preschool, like a preschool for the last 10 years. And before that, I taught first and second grade in a combined age classroom for 3 years. I also have 4 little ones at home. I guess some of them aren't so little, but they're, so I'm just in that transitioning to school stage still. So I'll be looking through that lens.
Emily, do you have someone going to kindergarten soon?
I did last year, and then I will again next year. So
we need to talk about that too through
all the feelings. Yep.
Oh my gosh, all the feelings. I have 4, they're not so little ones either, but the youngest just went to kindergarten last year. She had a wonderful experience, but every time I send a child off, it's just like this. I almost feel like it's the end of babyhood. I know it's not, but it's just everything goes so fast after. So
it does. Yeah, definitely a good but hard transition.
Yeah, all the feels with it. So let's dive in. Let's talk about the transition. So Carol, you mentioned that you taught in a preschool setting. And I want to know, what does kindergarten readiness mean?
Okay, so when I think about this question, I have first a big picture answer and then maybe a smaller, more tangible answer. But I like to think about this in three sections. So there's kindergarten readiness for schools and administration. So, making sure that schedules and classrooms in kindergarten are developmentally appropriate to children who have just come from preschool, and really and making sure that extra time is built in for things that early childhood students in early childhood will need, like maybe some more longer meal times, definitely extra recess time, like outside time. They're going to need to run around more. And having those administrators really educated about early childhood and understanding that early childhood doesn't end when they walk into the kindergarten room. It is from birth to age 8. So early childhood is this really long period of childhood. And then the second part I like to think about is for teachers. So teachers need kind of all of the above of that, but they also need that advocacy piece. So teachers who know and understand developmentally appropriate practice and can advocate with their administration and for the parents even, and for families, about what kindergarten and what early childhood looks like or could look like. And then for children, I'd like to try to change that narrative. So when I'm talking about kindergarten readiness, I always try to flip that script and say, well, let's not make kinder ready children. Instead, let's make the kindergarten ready for children. Child ready kindergartens.
Yeah.
And so that, again, that's going to look like a place where there's still opportunities for play and where they're still able to learn through inquiry, where the assessments are perhaps observational assessments, kind of continuing on that observational assessment, and understanding that they will come with some skills, and that those skills are valuable. They may not have those solid foundational academic skills yet, but the skills that they are bringing, self-help skills and self-regulation, things that they have learned in preschool, are just as important to have in kindergarten as, writing your name, because without those kind of first skills of socialization and self-regulation, they're not going to learn how to do those academic skills. And so then my more tangible, I think, idea about kindergarten readiness is just creating joyful classrooms, and bringing joy into the classroom. Those times when you're with your students, and, I did work in kindergarten for a little bit. I was a paraprofessional in kindergarten, so I was there as well. And those times of play, and when they're asking you questions and you're able to build on what they want to understand, I think are those magical moments in kindergarten. But you have to kind of allow for the space for that and allow for the time for that.
I love so much of what you said, especially I taught kindergarten. It is my wheelhouse. I love kindergarten. I'm supposed to be singing Dr. Jean on the carpet still. I don't know what happened,
That's right.
Here I am. But when you talk about advocacy and that role as teacher, boy, that's something that hindsight's always 2020, but it's something I really missed the mark on as an early childhood educator in a kindergarten classroom. I wish I would have had the voice to be able to support best practices in a way that it made sense to my principal and it made sense to my coworkers. It made sense to my families, and I just didn't. And then I feel if we don't ever speak up, we can't prepare kindergarten for our kids, because we're forgetting our solid why. But I love what you said about advocacy, and I agree with you. We've got to give our preschoolers a little bit more credit who are starting kindergarten with their ability to self-regulate. That's a huge skill that we're trying to support in birth through 5. And that's truly when we talk about kindergarten readiness. Can I regulate my emotions? Do I have a fancy word, executive functioning skills where, I can wait. I can take turns. I can have ownership of my thoughts and feelings, but you make me sad about the advocacy piece, Carolyn.
Well, I wouldn't want anybody, to feel bad about that, because I don't think it's easy, right? I don't think the system is set up to be easy. So, you really have to, you have to be confident in your knowledge, and teachers are professionals. And I just don't know that we're always like kind of made to feel like we are professionals and we are experts. So yeah, you have to, it's a process. It's definitely a process.
I even think when I sent my last baby, this one last year, I was speaking with a good friend who's early childhood person too, taught preschool, did all the things, does a bunch of research now. And I was kind of sharing my nervousness and my woes about what will happen. Will she like it? All this. And she said, the fact of it is right now how we have kindergarten designed is she will have to learn how to relearn what learning is. And I was like,
yeah,
exactly what's going on. But it's not all doom and gloom. So let's talk.
That's right.
It's not like there's so many good things happening. Then you're right about our educators being professionals. I think encouraging those to use their voice, use their, knowledge and expertise. But let's talk a little bit about developmentally appropriate practices. And Emily, share with us a little bit about what does that mean? And then what does it mean in regards to helping to transition children to kindergarten? Let's talk about DAP.
So I think I'm going to quote Carol here. She uses this a lot. Just children learn, like it's how humans learn best, right? It's interactive and it's hands-on, and they're asking questions. And if I think about myself personally, when I'm learning something, direct instruction's okay for a little bit, but then I need to really dig in and see where I'm confused and what I need clarification on, and really to grasp that skill or whatever I'm trying to learn. And I think it's the same for kids. They need that. They need those interactions, and they need to be learning things that they're interested about, and using multiple strategies to meet the needs of all the students. And kind of going back to that kindergarten readiness, I think a lot of parents are like, is my baby ready for kindergarten? And I think most teachers out there are just like ready to meet your kid where they're at, and they understand that different children have different needs. And so I think the developmentally appropriate practice is just kind of basing it. You have to know where they're at, and then just building off of that prior knowledge. And there's so many like wonderful teachers out there and wonderful school districts who are doing the best they can with the standards that they're given. And they recognize like this is really hard work that those kindergartners are doing. And so I think, like Carol mentioned, the classroom should be joyful and should meet the kids where they're at.
So when you were an in-home provider, Emily, and you were, doing that important, powerful work, were developmentally appropriate practices at the heart of what you did? Was it a joyful place to be?
Well, I thought so. I mean, I think children just can have fun. They can get excited about whatever it is you are doing. If the teacher is having fun teaching, those children will, you co-regulate your emotions. So if I'm feeling joyful in what I'm teaching them, they're going to feel joyful also. And so, yes, we were messy, we were busy, and my classroom would be a disaster at the end of the day. And that's just part of life. That's how they were active and engaged in learning. So
I agree. And not every moment, listeners, is a joyful moment. No one's saying that.
No, that's right.
We are saying that if you share that joy with kids, amazing things happen.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
Yeah. Carol, any other thoughts on DAP and really bringing that in when we're thinking of transitions?
Well, I just want to echo Emily. And I do often say, especially to my students in teacher ed, we have to start thinking about our students as human beings.
Yeah.
And shifting that narrative of like, they are the child, I am the adult. It is like, we are all humans. And thinking about like, how best do humans learn? And I often, especially when I was in the preschool classroom, I often thought about like, well, how do I learn? I'm a very hands-on visual learner. And so I would really try to incorporate that kind of learning style into teaching the children, or really try to watch and see, even my college students, how are they learning best? And so I think at the heart of that developmentally appropriate practice is understanding, how humans learn and the different ways that we learn at different stages and ages and that kind of thing.
Even sometimes different days. Like
different days. Again, yeah. They are humans. They have bad days. They have good days. They have silly days, just as we as teachers go in and like, maybe we're not having the best day or maybe we're having a great day. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny to me, as former kindergarten teacher coming from kindergarten land, if you would have asked me the question of what does kindergarten readiness mean to you when I was in the heart of teaching, and my responses would not be very DAP. I would tell you, I want them to recognize their name. It would be ideal if they know their colors and shapes. I sure would love if they knew some letters of the alphabet and could identify. I want them to be able to snap their pants. I need them have a real traditional kind of list. So I think when people hear the words kindergarten readiness, we might have some ideas floating in our brains that necessarily aren't research-based with how humans learn, how young humans learn, how preschool children learn. So let's talk a little bit on the other side of the coin. Like, let's flip the coin and talk about what is not necessarily something appropriate that you need to be doing in your program if you're working with preschool age children. What's not part of this readiness journey?
Well, when I'm thinking about this question, I want to kind of avoid the any kind of shaming for teachers. Because again, teaching is a super hard job. So when I think about this question, I think, well, how about, instead of the absolute, there are of course things that are not developmentally appropriate, but let's think about things that maybe we can take in pieces. So I know there's been a lot of talk about standardized testing in kindergarten, and I am, I'm not a fan of that. And, I know that's kind of that can be a trigger topic for people, but, research shows that using some standardized testing is good information. It just shouldn't be the sole way you are assessing children. So it can be useful, but you need this more rounded way of assessing. And so I am a big fan of observational assessment. I love understanding learning through watching. So just taking that time to watch what they're doing, making sure your environment is set up intentionally so that you're going to maximize that learning. And so combining all those things to paint that picture of what they're learning and what they're doing. I think the problem comes when teachers are trying to defend that children are learning. And I think something that early childhood teachers have kind of learned to do, because we spend a lot of time watching and seeing, like last week they could not climb on that monkey bar. And, I watched them all week working on that. And now they are moving across that monkey bar. So we are very good early childhood teachers at like noticing that learning. But I think it's harder when you're asked for some kind of product. So I think that's where we start to see, like the worksheets and the flashcards, because there has to be a product. So it's a big lift, but I think that changing of that mindset of how we can measure learning, I think will kind of lead us to that more developmentally appropriate practice, and will allow educators to see it's almost working against those things that are not developmentally appropriate, almost work against the ultimate goal.
I so agree with you when you say that, especially when you're talking about if we can change how we measure, our practices also might switch over to more DAP. And I want to talk a little bit about what you kind of dipped your toe in there with the product versus process. Mm-hmm. And that's even true with how we expect children to interact with materials or lessons or objectives or any of those things. I put my kids in programs where they would come home dirty with an empty backpack. I didn't want a receipt for their preschool. Like, I didn't want a worksheet where you connect the dots, but not every family understands the same way that early childhood teachers do. So I feel like our provider's role sometimes too is really helping support our families understand the how young children learn, what we do all day. It's a big job, and love what you said about teacher shaming. No. We are not trying to teacher shame anyone who's listening who's like, oh my gosh, I've done nothing but worksheets all summer.
Right.
I thought I was helping. It's just really looking at the holistic kind of why we do what we do, and then how. Emily, any thoughts on that as a preschool teacher, especially in an in-home setting? I think it's a different view from where you were too.
Yeah. So I think those skills that the worksheets they're trying to teach in the worksheets, like they're necessary skills, right? Like, can you count? Can you do one-to-one correspondence? But you can also teach those skills you can teach number recognition in Uno. You can play one-to-one correspondence with Candyland, and so playing those games, you can teach those same skills, and it doesn't feel like work to those kids, but they are learning, whereas I know when kids come home from school, sometimes they're like, oh, these worksheets, or whatever. But so it can be taught in a fun way.
So let's talk about play a little bit. We mentioned that at the beginning, and Carol, you teach a course on play. So let's talk about it. So when I think about play as a part of preparing children for transitioning to kindergarten, I believe that firmly. I know that to be true, but I want you to explain, maybe, Carol, a little bit, what is our provider's role in play alongside children? Like, how can our providers start to see themselves as part of that play with overtaking it and turning it into something else? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it really starts with setting up that environment so that it is intentional. So, we talk a lot about interest centers versus play centers. And those interest centers are going to be areas where you are specifically targeting a skill or an idea or a practice. And then the play centers are necessary as well, but those are going to be basic, like fun things. And now the children are going to learn in all those centers. Because play is learning. But that's like the first job of that educator, is to make sure the environment, and that there are opportunities for children to experience a variety of, experiences. I use the example from my classroom where I did never, ever sat down and taught children handwriting. But what I did was I intentionally set materials in all the centers where they could experience notebooks, papers, holding pens, crayons. I mean, you just set up those experiences. And then I think, often educators are encouraged to sidle up to a child who's playing and start firing questions. What are you doing? Yeah. What are you? And there's space for that. There's room for that. But really what I think is is that observation, kind of sitting back and watching. And then waiting for that invitation, because that happens in classrooms. The child wants to invite the teacher into that play. And so waiting for those invitations, but in the meantime, like really just watching, what are they doing? What am I observing? Because you will start to see all this learning happening, whether it's figuring out a ramp. Can the car go down if it's too low or too high? I mean, like that's physics. So I think that would be my first two things, is set up your environment and then really see yourself as the observer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's where I feel as a teacher, I had a hard time when it came to play. First of all, I was never taught how to appropriately play in the kindergarten room. In fact, I was doing a lot of my assessing during center time and polling groups and, not really seeing it for the value that it was. So I feel like it's always this kind of balancing act of, yes, I want to observe, I want to be there, I want to be invited. That's a big piece too. Mm-hmm. But I have to see myself as an intentional facilitator of learning. And often I feel like adults fall in this trap, especially in dramatic play center, where we'll sit down and we'll be like, and now I want coffee and on my pizza.
That's right. And I'm holding the baby and I'm changing the baby. And
make me a list, like show me your work. You like it. It's such a hard, it's this balance. I love what you're mentioning about setting up intentional opportunities through how we have our environment set in birth through 5 rooms.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember, okay, so I am a play advocate and I believe that play should be in all levels of education.
Yeah.
I think with my college students, I think they should, but it's going to look different in different classes, in different grade levels. Mm-hmm. So it's important to remember that, like you're perhaps not going to spend as much time as you would in kindergarten playing as you would in 3rd grade playing, but we want to make sure that we're still including those things. And like, I love how Emily brought up the games, because as children start to get older and they start to understand games with rules, then these are ways that they can experience learning, especially those academic skills, words and reading and math. Games are a great way to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is like we should have a whole nother episode on play.
I'm down for it.
All right. You heard it here. I feel like it is a holistic, like when we're talking about how do we get everybody ready for kindergarten, what's our role, what's our job, especially when we're thinking about through the lens of step up to quality. So listeners who are listening, many are already part of step up to quality, and some of you listening might even be considering joining step up to quality. And in the 2nd edition in 2.0, there actually is a new indicator for family engagement and partnerships. And it's really looking for our providers to help support our families in this transition to kindergarten. So Emily, can you talk to us a little bit, since you were in that world, you had families who, left your program and went into different formal kindergarten settings. Talk to us about how can our providers listening use strategies to help implement this new standard with fidelity and to do it well? What ideas do you have?
Well, I think providers, they wear so many hats. Just they're the first point of contact, with when they pick up in the morning, or when they drop off in the morning, that's, providers are there. And I think just being available to listen to concerns that parents have or that families have about going to kindergarten, or and just connecting them with the resources that they might need. Like if they are concerned about if they're concerned about like being identified with a disability, or needing help with like a financial situation, and just making those connections for them as you transition to kindergarten. Because I think providers kind of provide this small, safe place where, and then when you go to school, sometimes you just, with our school, you drop off outside the building and you don't go in, and And so it just can be kind of scary and overwhelming. And so I think any chance that providers can get to partner with those school districts and be a part of, and then that's maybe more on the school district side, inviting those providers in, because I think they're willing and available, but the opportunity isn't always there. I think prepping your children for going to kindergarten, obviously, talking to them about it. You could show them pictures, you can read them books, you can, even if you have older siblings, they can come in and share something, or just talking about that and understanding, like, it may make you feel nervous, but you can do this, and just prepping them in that way.
I love what you're mentioning about validating feelings around the change. It is a big change. Young children are so much more capable than we give them credit for. And if we don't acknowledge and validate those feelings, it's almost this missed opportunity to support social emotional learning with it.
Yeah. And those feelings can show themselves in different ways, especially when you're 4 and 5 years old, or if I'm feeling stressed, I show my stress in different ways. And so if we're feeling stressed, our kids are feeling stressed, and just the change brings stress. And so just acknowledging that and helping them deal with that, walking alongside them, is key.
And I think even validating the family's feelings.
Yeah.
Especially if it's your first one to go, it's really validating that, it's okay for you to kind of mourn this babyhood. Like it is a big deal. I was cleaning out my closet. This is maybe unnecessary part of the podcast, but I'm going to do it anyway. I was cleaning out my closet just yesterday, and who I found was Miss Kindergarten, the dog from kindergarten gets ready for the first day of kindergarten. And I read that book every year. I read it with my own children. It just brings up all these feelings and memories of that anxiety. I was a teacher. I knew exactly what was kindergarten. I still was really, really a challenging part of my journey as a parent, I feel. I think
at the heart of what Emily is saying too is that it's about building relationships.
Yeah.
And I think early childhood teachers and even, providers are probably really good at building relationships because we have so much time with families.
Yes.
Because they're not just being dropped off at the door. Like my students had to be picked up and dropped off by a caregiver. We had opportunities, we had home visits, we had conferences. I was always in communication with families. And so I think, having, understanding readiness for school is going to also really depend on that relationship that they have with the early childhood teacher. I've had several parents of former students contact me just to update me on how the children were doing, send me pictures of like the first day of second grade or something, like we just built that relationship.
Yes. After.
Yeah. And I think that, Carol, what you just said encompasses why this indicator is a new part of Step Up to Quality, like why we have this as a standard now, as something that we're looking for. Like, we want you to build those relationships. We want you to be that bridge where you're doing what Emily suggested, like having connections with the school. So, someone that you can guide them to if they're looking, who do I contact at blah, blah, blah district? Like, what do I do? I don't know. How do we find this? Like, I feel like our birth through 5 providers really can help fill that role as a bridge over. And what you're saying too, Carol, like never losing that relationship. My students are really old. They're grown-ups now. And I still have connections with some of their moms. Like it never ends. It's just it's a gift to be able to do what we do in early childhood. I do believe that. And I appreciate everything that you all just shared on how do we support, how do we really think about looking at kindergarten readiness through a different lens. Are there any last minute ahas or things that you're thinking of as we're wrapping up? Anything else you want to end with to say to our providers on their journey with preparing children to transition to kindergarten?
I think I would just I think I would just want to encourage them to step back and validate that the work is hard. And that there is a part that, they have to take care of themselves. And I know there's been a lot of talk about teachers and, taking care of themselves, but really it's hard work because we are dealing with so many different types of people and so many different humans. And so acknowledge that it's hard, take time, make sure you take time to care for yourself and your family, and really just be proud of the difference that you're making, because I truly believe that early childhood providers make a difference in families' lives.
Absolutely.
100%. That's exactly what I was thinking. It is taking care of children, providing for them is hard work. And it's exhausting, but you matter to those families and to those children, and definitely making a huge impact.
I love what you both said. Like, you matter. It's hard. It's okay to say it's hard. And Carol, you mentioned taking care of yourself. So a theme for season 2's podcast, you just set me up so nicely, is self-care for providers, educators, teacher, whatever word you want to use. But what I want to know is, what do you two either do now or used to do when you were working in a setting such as preschool? How did you take care of yourselves? What do you do to keep your bucket filled so you can keep doing your important work? What's your self-care secrets? Share them out.
Well, besides just, I'm an outdoors person, so I love being outside. I love being in nature. So camping and visiting places where I can be outside. But honestly, while I was teaching preschool, I took up the hobby of quilting.
Ooh.
And that got me through a lot of very stressful years, is just being able to, focus some attention and on what my hands were doing and creating something. So I created quilts.
That's a great one. I haven't heard that one yet, but I believe that to be almost meditative. I don't quilt. Sure. I crochet, same sort of, it's the similar little, it is like
exactly
Zen. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What about you, Emily? What did you do or currently do to take care of yourself?
Go for a run or a walk, be outside for sure. 100%. I also, when I was a provider, I took the chime class. It was, and it was all about self-care and just spending time meditating a little bit and just calming your mind and your body. And I found that to be super helpful.
I'm so glad you're mentioning the chime class, because we have an episode this season on chime.
Awesome.
You guys set me up so nicely for this.
Great. It was I loved it. It was good. It was just kind of a nice 1 hour, and it was a very calm, you just kind of relaxed. So
those are good strategies. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas with others. I think sometimes when we share self-care things, it doesn't seem as far-fetched or as weird or like I can't do it. Like when you're telling me I can go for a run or go for a walk, and that's self-care. That's mine too. That's my go-to. Quilting. I wouldn't have thought of that, Carol, but yeah, that's a really good example of something that's makes you feel more centered, more grounded. Like all those things are self-care. So we so appreciate your voices on our back to school episode. And thank you, listeners, for spending quality time with us. Please join again as we chat about future topics to support our Nebraskan providers on their journey with Step Up to Quality. Until next time, bye-bye.